Everything about this matchup comes down to one simple reality that people outside Pittsburgh keep overlooking. And it's the same reality the locker room has been leaning into all week. Nobody wanted the Steelers here, but they're here anyway. And now the path forward demands that they become something unpredictable. This is not a team limping into the playoffs hoping for chaos. This is a team that believes it found its identity at exactly the right time, and the details inside this Texans matchup explain why that belief isn't just noise. The challenge starts immediately with the Houston defense, and there's no sugarcoating it. This is an aggressive, disciplined unit with playmakers at every level. Mike Tomlin didn't mince words when he called Will Anderson Jr. and Danielle Hunter the best edge-rushing tandem in football. That statement alone tells you how seriously the Steelers are taking what's coming off the edge. Houston doesn't rely on smoke and mirrors. They line up, show you what they're doing, and dare you to beat them anyway. That confidence is earned. They rank among the very best in yards and points allowed, and they consistently disrupt games by winning up front. But here's where this game quietly tilts into dangerous territory for Houston. For all the things the Texans do well, there are cracks, and the Steelers' offensive plan is clearly designed to hit those exact pressure points. Houston struggles on 3rd and long, they struggle defending the deep ball. They give up explosive plays at a higher rate than most people realize, and they miss tackles more than a defense with this reputation should. That matters, because the Steelers know everyone expects them to lean conservative, to run the ball, to dump it off to Jaylen Warren and Kenneth Gainwell, and to avoid putting too much stress on Aaron Rodgers behind an offensive line that will be tested all night. The Texans expect that too, and that's exactly why the Steelers are preparing to attack differently. The Ravens game showed something important. Even without DK Metcalf, this offense proved it could stretch the field. They hit vertical routes to Pat Freiermuth, Calvin Austin III, and Adam Thielen. They showed timing, trust, and willingness to push the ball when the moment demanded it. Now Metcalf is back, and his presence changes the geometry of the field in ways no stat sheet can fully explain. Defenses don't just guard him, they react to him. They roll coverage, they hesitate, and they leave windows elsewhere that simply don't exist when he's not on the field. That's why Pat Freiermuth looms so large in this game. Houston's linebackers and safeties will be tested vertically and down the seams, and the Steelers know it. Early success there doesn't just create yardage, it forces the Texans to defend every blade of grass. And once that happens, the running game and short passing game become far more efficient, not because of volume, but because of spacing. The goal isn't to throw deep every snap. It's to pick spots, punish aggression, and make a disciplined defense uncomfortable for the first time in weeks. Aaron Rodgers' role in all of this cannot be overstated. This is exactly why the Steelers valued his experience. Houston doesn't disguise much. They trust their system. Rodgers has seen every coverage, every front, every pressure look imaginable. He knows when to speed things up, when to catch a defense with too many men on the field, and when to attack leverage before it disappears. This game is as much a mental chess match as it is a physical one, and the Steelers believe that favors them more than the national narrative admits. What also feeds into that belief is how this team has learned to win close, physical games. The Ravens' win wasn't just another result. It reinforced a locker room-wide understanding that they can survive chaos, manage momentum swings, and execute late without panicking. Calvin Austin II's confidence coming out of that game matters. His season has been uneven, but when he's involved and trusted, this offense becomes faster and harder to predict. That belief spreads, especially in January. There's also a red zone dynamic here that deserves attention. Houston is elite at preventing teams from getting inside the 20, but once teams do, they're far more vulnerable. The Steelers, meanwhile, have quietly been efficient finishing drives. If they can string together sustained possessions, control the tempo better than they did earlier in the season, and capitalize when opportunities arise, the math of this game starts to change quickly. All of this feeds into one central truth. The Steelers are not walking into this game hoping to survive. They're walking in with a plan to dictate terms, to challenge a defense where it's weakest, and to lean on a growing sense of identity forged late in the season. The margin for error is thin, but the blueprint is real, and it's rooted in specifics, not optimism. So, when you look at this matchup honestly, do you see a Steelers team that's simply happy to be here? Or do you see a team that has quietly positioned itself to shock people by attacking Houston in ways most teams haven't even tried yet? On the other side of the ball, this game may ultimately be decided by how well the Steelers' defense enforces discipline, because the Texans' offense is built to punish even the smallest lapse. Houston doesn't overwhelm you with constant explosive plays. Instead, they wear you down. They stay ahead of the sticks, pick up manageable chunks on early downs, and keep C.J. Stroud in situations where he can operate comfortably. That comfort is the enemy, and the Steelers know it. Everything Houston does offensively is designed to protect Stroud. The run game isn't dominant, but it's purposeful. It exists to set up movement in the pocket, rollouts to both sides, and quick decisions that limit exposure. According to league tracking, the Texans lead the NFL in passing yards off quarterback rollouts, and that's not an accident. It's a structural pillar of their offense. If the Steelers lose edge discipline or overcommit inside, Stroud will make them pay by extending plays and finding receivers working back across the field. That's why this matchup puts so much weight on the Steelers' ability to stop the run without selling out. Houston ranks near the bottom of the league in yards per carry, and that's an opening. If Pittsburgh can win on early downs, force second and long and third and long situations, the entire complexion of the game changes. Stroud's numbers under pressure tell a clear story. When he's clean, he's efficient and deadly. When he's pressured, his completion percentage drops dramatically, and the turnover opportunities rise. That's the line the Steelers are trying to walk. Pressure without chaos, aggression without losing structure. This is where the front seven becomes critical. Cam Hayward, Keanu Benton, and the interior defenders have to collapse the pocket and disrupt timing, not just rush blindly. If they can do that, it unlocks the true strength of this defense. The edge rushers, T.J. Watt, Alex Highsmith, Nick Herbig, and Jack Sawyer, are not just chasing sacks in this game. They're trying to dictate down and distance to make Houston abandon the comfort of balance and play from behind the chains.
The red zone numbers also tilt this matchup in a fascinating way. Houston struggles to finish drives with touchdowns. They rank near the bottom of the league in red zone touchdown percentage. The Steelers, meanwhile, are one of the better red zone defenses in football. That creates a scenario where bend but don't break isn't a failure, it's a strategy. Forcing field goals instead of touchdowns keeps this game tight and magnifies every offensive possession Pittsburgh gets. In the secondary, one matchup stands above the rest. Joey Porter Jr. versus Nico Collins. This is not just a clash of talent, it's a measuring stick moment. Collins is a physical, explosive route runner who has become the focal point of Houston's passing game. Porter Jr., meanwhile, has quietly put together an elite season. He has not allowed a single touchdown this year, and the only touchdown he has ever surrendered in his NFL career came before he became a full-time starter as a rookie. That's not hype, that's production. Houston will test him. They'll isolate him. They'll challenge him to win one-on-one. How often they do that may depend on how well the Steelers stop the run early. If Porter Jr. holds up the way he has all season, it allows the safeties to stay patient, to avoid cheating downhill, and to play aggressively on routes developing behind them. That's how turnovers happen. That's how momentum flips in playoff games. What's different about this Steelers defense compared to earlier in the season is health and clarity. James Pierre is healthy. Joey Porter Jr. is healthy. The secondary doesn't have to compensate as much for breakdowns up front. That balance matters, because against Houston, overreaction is deadly. Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry force the Steelers to choose a hill to die on. This Texans offense doesn't have that same dynamic threat, and that gives Pittsburgh the chance to stay true to its structure instead of chasing ghosts. Zooming out, this entire game feels like a test of identity for both teams. Houston believes in its system, its defense, and its controlled offensive approach. The Steelers believe they found a version of themselves that can adapt, strike when necessary, and win ugly if that's what the night demands. The offense hasn't delivered a defining playoff touchdown in years. The defense has had moments where it cracked under postseason pressure. Both sides carry scars into this game, but this version of the Steelers isn't pretending those scars don't exist. They're confronting them head-on, with a plan that attacks Houston where it's vulnerable and challenges them to execute under stress. If Pittsburgh can control early downs, steal a few explosive plays, and force the Texans into uncomfortable situations, this game becomes the kind of physical, grinding contest they thrive in. Now it comes down to belief meeting execution. Do you trust this Steelers team to finally flip the script in January, or do you think the Texans' balance and discipline will be too much to overcome? What makes this moment so compelling for Steelers fans is that it doesn't feel manufactured. This isn't blind optimism or postseason fantasy built on history alone. It's rooted in how the last stretch of football has looked, how roles have settled, and how this roster has started to resemble something cohesive instead of fragmented. Late in the season, the Steelers stopped chasing perfection and started leaning into efficiency, toughness, and timing, and that shift shows up everywhere when you study this matchup deeper. One of the most underrated elements entering this game is how much better the Steelers have been at controlling possession over the past several weeks. The season-long numbers don't flatter them, but context matters. Early in the year, short drives and quick defensive turnarounds kept this team near the bottom of the league in time of possession. Recently, that has changed. Sustained drives, even when they don't always end in touchdowns, have given the defense breathing room and kept games within striking distance. Against a Texans team that ranks near the top of the league in time of possession, flipping that dynamic even slightly could have a massive ripple effect. If the Steelers can string together first downs, even methodically, it limits Houston's ability to dictate pace. It keeps Stroud on the sideline. It forces the Texans' defense to defend longer drives, where missed tackles and mental lapses are more likely to surface. This is where players like Jaylen Warren and Kenneth Gainwell become quietly important, not because of highlight plays, but because of consistency. A 4-yard gain on first down changes the entire playbook. A check down that turns into 8 yards changes how linebackers react on the next snap. These are the small wins that add up in January. There's also a psychological layer to this game that shouldn't be ignored. The Steelers have not won a playoff game in years. That fact hangs over the franchise, the fan base, and the national conversation every January. Inside the building, though, it's being framed differently. This isn't about breaking a drought. It's about proving that this version of the team can finish. That distinction matters. Teams that play not to lose history often tighten up. Teams that focus on execution tend to play freer, even under pressure. Defensively, the Steelers are walking into this game with something they haven't always had in recent postseasons: favorable matchups that don't require compromise. Against Baltimore, sacrifices had to be made. Against Houston, that's not necessarily the case. The Steelers don't have to abandon coverage integrity to stop the run. They don't have to overload the box at the expense of their corners. They can play sound football and still be aggressive. That balance is rare, and when it exists, it creates opportunities for momentum-swinging plays that don't require gambling. This is also where experience quietly shows itself. Cam Hayward understands how playoff games tilt emotionally. TJ Watt understands how one negative play can change a quarterback's internal clock for the rest of the night. Joey Porter Jr. understands that the best corners don't chase interceptions, they erase options. All of those lessons matter more now than at any point in the regular season. None of this guarantees anything. Houston is a talented, disciplined team with a clear identity and a quarterback who has shown poise beyond his years. But the Steelers aren't walking into this game as passengers. They're walking in believing they can dictate style, tempo, and stress points. If they succeed, even briefly, doubt creeps into the other sideline. And once doubt enters a playoff game, things unravel quickly. So as kickoff approaches, the real question isn't whether the Steelers can survive this matchup. It's whether they can impose themselves just enough, early enough, to force Houston to play a game it doesn't want to play. If that happens, everything you think you know about this postseason path could change. As this game moves closer, the tension isn't coming from uncertainty, it's coming from possibility. That's the difference. The Steelers aren't entering this postseason hoping something fluky breaks their way. They're entering it believing that if they play their brand of football for 4 quarters, the margins will be tight enough for experience, discipline, and situational execution to decide the outcome. That belief doesn't show up on a stat sheet, but it absolutely shows up in how teams respond when the game inevitably swings. There will be moments when Houston lands a punch. This Texans defense is too talented not to. There will be drives where the Steelers are forced to punt, series where the pass rush gets home, stretches where points are hard to come by. The critical question is how the Steelers respond to those moments. Do they press, or do they stay patient? Everything from the last few weeks suggests patience has finally become part of their DNA. They've learned that not every drive has to be decisive, not every series has to end in points, and not every snap requires heroics. That's especially important when you consider how Houston wants to win. The Texans thrive when opponents get frustrated and abandon structure. They feed off predictable desperation. If the Steelers stay composed, keep trusting their plan, and continue to take calculated shots instead of reckless ones, they force Houston into a longer, more uncomfortable night. That's when the cracks appear. That's when missed tackles matter. That's when third and long becomes a real problem. That's when pressure turns into mistakes instead of highlights. Offensively, the Steelers are not chasing volume. They're chasing leverage. DK Metcalf doesn't need 12 targets to change the game. His presence alone alters coverage rules. Pat Freiermuth doesn't need a career night to matter. A handful of key catches on third down can flip field position and momentum. Jaylen Warren and Kenneth Gainwell don't need explosive runs every touch. They need to